Well, we are really privileged today to have a person that you have read about and heard about in many different ways as our guest speaker. He has been providing passionate leadership in the field of making our communities more livable in every way. You read about his service as the director of parks in Bogota. It's known internationally for what happened. He served 2 terms as the park commissioner and then talked his brother into running for mayor of Bogota, who continued on with his former assistant as parks commissioner. And over that period of time, during our guest speaker's 2 terms as parks commissioner, he created several major city parks, walkable areas, and over 800 parks and green spaces, absolutely transforming Bogota during that time. It's a remarkable record and something that is well known internationally. And as we were talking at lunch, and I think this is so important, he said to transform a city and to provide for it walkable, livable spaces, green spaces in which to congregate, in which to have recreation, you really change the whole nature of the place so that it is a place, for example, where young people don't want to leave it. They want to live there because they love it. They love existing in that environment, being in that community. And so the most talented, creative young people that you have in that community stay. And as a result of their energy and their ability, they also begin to transform the community economically, creating new economic opportunities for everyone so that they can stay. So it's a transformation that takes place. And it's a transformation that takes place through transforming the environment, creation of parks, and other things that are so necessary. What an example this kind of partnership is. What a gift those 2 brothers working together have created for their home country and for their home city. He has worked in more than 180 different cities across 6 continents, advising municipal leaders. His focus is the design and use of parks and streets as great public spaces and spaces for people to congregate. He has a unique blend of pragmatism and passion, and his leadership is sought by so many cities and organizations. He is founder of 8-80 Cities, a Canadian-based nonprofit organization dedicated to the transformation of cities. And we were again talking about that. What's the meaning of 8-80? Well, it's his belief, and I think it's a belief we can all readily understand. And I'm becoming more sympathetic to the far end spectrum of the age group every day. I think it's an urgent need. If you can build communities which are suitable for people who are 8 years old and suitable for people that are 80 years old at the other end of the spectrum at the same time, you've hit the right place. And so he has founded this organization, which he calls 8-80. And it's been recognized all over the country and in Canada. Serves on the board of directors of the City Parks Alliance. He's the recipient of the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal in honor of his significant contributions and achievements in Canada. And also, he was selected as one of the 10 most influential Hispanics in Canada by the Canadian ambassador to the United Nations for being such a driving force behind the creative class in Canada. His talk, Cities for All Ages, reflects his passion for the inclusive building of the right kinds of communities, especially cities. So it is really great to have him here, especially as you reflect upon the needs of your own communities. I'm pleased about the impact of our conference 2 years ago on our city of Norman, for example, where we have begun planning for the zoning and the ultimate development of the whole area from Main Street to Boyd Street through Campus Corner And we've even gone so far as to open our minds to the unthinkable that we might once again have a two-way Main Street. So the other, I hope so, and I hope it'll be soon. Let's not study about it any longer. So we have someone here to inspire us, someone who's set the example for us internationally and in our neighboring country of Canada as well as his home country of Colombia. We welcome him today, and we're really honored that Gil Penalosa could be here with us today. It's my pleasure to present him.
What if we had places that we could actually age in place and we could cure obesity? You know, today around the world, there are twice as many people, twice as many cities where people are dying of overweight than underweight. And we could places where we could cure mild depression and anxiety. And where actually we could save instead of spending $1 out of $4 on mobility and had money to go and shop. And we had places where we could develop a sense of belonging and where we could improve our concentration. And if they are well managed, it would be good for safety. And we had more time for family and friends. And our children could actually connect with nature. And not only the children, also the moms and the babies. It's not magic. It's not dreaming. It's sustainable mobility. It's parks. It's public spaces. That's what we're going to be talking about this afternoon. So, can you do me a favor on the screens? Could we have on the screen all the time the slides? Thank you. Because I'm going to be showing many, many images. So I really want to thank President Boren, Mr. and Mrs. Boren, for this opportunity to share some ideas, as well as Ian Carlton for having invited me. And what a great, I've heard so many great things. I was talking with President Boren a while ago, and he said, talking about international. Here the university had 1 out of 100 students going to do studies abroad. Today is 30 out of 100. And the goal is to reach 50 out of 100. And why is this so important? Because that is what we're going to be talking about this afternoon and actually throughout the day. When we talk about placemaking, it's not just because it's nice, it's not just because it's fun. No, this quality of life issue is an issue of competitiveness. We live in an ever more globalized world. And when we live in a globalized world, the best people, they can live anywhere they want to. However you define best, can be the best engineers, the best coffee makers, the best carpenters, the best medical doctors. So every day, the leaders of our cities have to wake up thinking, how can we retain our best people? How can we attract the best people? So quality of life, placemaking, is the most important tool of economic competitiveness. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some ideas. So I'm going to be talking about a little bit about my previous life, what 880 is, the urgency, sustainable mobility, parks, and elements to change, and how to build a broad alliance. A little bit about my previous life. I was commissioner in Bogota. I'm not going to talk about Bogota because I think it's better than Norman. I wish. But nevertheless, I'm talking because it's not about the money. And also because now I advise many mayors and governors, but before I used to be on the other side, I was doing. For example, in my first term, we built 2 metropolitan parks and over 200 neighborhood parks. This was one of them, the Simon Bolivar Park. But let me go back to Simon Bolivar a little bit afterwards. We built 174 miles of protected bikeways in 3 years and went from less than 0.5% to more than 5% bicycle share. And we always separating the pedestrians and the cyclists, having a connectivity. But something that is very, very important is that it was in some of the areas you couldn't even dream in your worst nightmare how poor they were. And look at how we transform. Why do we need good quality sidewalks, good quality bikeways? Because it's safer, but also because we need to dignify the pedestrians and the cyclists. And we also need to be consistent. We got to have our politicians being consistent between what they think, what they say, and what they do. And this is so. At some point, we're in some areas we didn't have enough money for walking and cycling and cars. So we had to choose. So we started walking and cycling, and we let the future administration take care of the cars. Of course, it's gutsy. By the way, now all the monitors are working, if anybody. So we continue with doing it, and it was quite nice. And another thing we did is ciclovia, and I'm so happy that here in Oklahoma City, yesterday was open streets. Let's give them a hand to the people in Oklahoma. That's a great start. What is it? When I became commissioner, one of the things I was obsessed, we had a program with very few miles and very few thousand people. But I was thinking of Central Park. Central Park in New York, I was reading the biography of Frederick Olmsted, who did Central Park. And he said 150 years ago, in New York, everybody hated everybody. The locals and the immigrants, the blacks and the whites, the rich and the poor. And he said, they don't know each other. They don't live in the same buildings. Their children don't go to the same schools. They don't go to the same doctor. We need to find places where people can meet each other as equals. So that's how Central Park was born in 1850. And then I said, every city of any size, of 10,000 people, 100,000, 10 million, can have a Central Park for a few hours every Sunday of the year. And that's how we started working with the ciclovia. And we are opening 80 miles of roads every Sunday of the year. But since not everybody wants to walk and bike or skate, so along the road we do aerobics, we do Tai Chi, yoga, cha-cha-cha. And now it's something wonderful. It's like an exercise in social integration because we get the young and the old and the rich and the poor and the fat and the skinny. We get over 1.3 million people every Sunday of the year. And actually yesterday I was in LA. Can you imagine the city of angels that is also the city of cars? Now has their own ciclovia. Magnificent ciclovia. Here I was with Mayor Eric Garcetti, who also took a small program that was twice a year, and now he committed to create a culture of change, and he's doing it 12 times a year. And here he is with other councilors and senators, because we need to get in this together. Politicians at all levels, at the municipal, at the county, at the state, at the federal. We got to get the city staff. And it was great. You see people of all ages. Can you imagine what these thousands of people, yesterday there were more than 150,000. Can you imagine what they were doing on Sunday morning? Oh, this is the queen of the skateboard. Look at that. What would they be doing on a Sunday morning? Either sleeping or drinking beer or watching TV. Instead, they're outside doing physical activity. And it's great for business. Because the business get these 100,000 people that have never even, they didn't even know that there was this restaurant. Here they were even doing free tattoos. So for business, it's fantastic. All of a sudden, you get all of these people. And I think that Oklahoma City, and Norman, we should have one here, and in Tulsa, and everywhere. But of course, one recommendation, yesterday was great, but it's a great start. It was only 0.8 miles. We got to do 5 or more miles because we want people to bike along the way. We don't want people to be bunched up. I mean, if we close down a block to do a party, it's good, but it's not an open street. If we close it to do a farmer's market, it's good, but it's not an open street. Open street is about physical activity. So it has to be long enough so that people can skate and run and walk. And in 0.8 miles, you cannot do that, especially with so many people. So it's a good start, but hopefully next year, it's at least once a month. And hopefully it's 5 miles or more. Like LA. I mean, what does LA has that you don't have? You are better than LA, right? And Portland was doing it, and many cities, and it's something that is interesting. It works in big cities, in small cities. And why? Because it changes mind. Here I was with the mayor of Berkeley and Oakland. I took him to the one in San Francisco. And here, they also come out and they do planning. They tell the citizens, get on your knees and start telling us how does it work. And in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and getting people in different areas. In New York, they were going to do a lot of changes on the streets. So they said, we need to shake people up. to look at streets in a different way. So we went with Janet Sarikan, the Commissioner of Transportation, and Amanda Burden, Commissioner of Planning. We took a flight Friday night to Bogota, Saturday talk, Sunday up and down on the Ciclovia, that night back to New York, and they announced they were going to do it. So they are doing it because they were going to do transformation, that having streets like this one that were dangerous for cyclists into this one that is nice and safe. Who would have thought? We got to be bold. If you had told anybody 7 years ago that Times Square was going to be pedestrian, they would have thought you were crazy. Well, now Times Square is pedestrian. And the DOT is doing yoga and Tai Chi in the middle of Times Square. The DOT, transportation, is doing more fun activities than parks and recreation. But not just in any street. Their open street, they call it Summer Street, is on the most iconic road where people want to go, along Park Avenue. And we get everybody, young and old. Who would have thought, where people painting and just dancing in the middle of Park Avenue, 8 lanes, full of, this is like, all you really need to enjoy this is 2 feet and a heartbeat. And then you're going to see miles of smiles. It's fantastic. So let's try to do it. This is Janet Sarikan, great leader. So, 880. Well, the president already said it very well, because 880 is not really about parks and streets and sidewalks and walking and cycling. Those are the means. The end, how we contribute to have successful cities and healthy communities where people are going to be happier, enjoying their parks and their public places. And wherever I go, always people say, Gil, is this intersection safe? Can our children walk or bike to school? Can our older adults walk to get public transit? I said, look, you don't have to be a transportation engineer. 3 simple steps. The 880 rule of thumb. Step number 1, think of a child that you love around 8 years old. Your son or daughter or nephew. Once you have that child in mind, step number 2, think of an older adult that you also love. And when you have the 8-year-old and the 80-year-old in mind, then step number 3, would you send them across that intersection? Would you send them walking to get eggs or milk or to go to school? If you would, it's because it's safe enough. If you would not, it's because it's not, and we got to do it better. What if everything that we did here in Norman, everything had to be great? The sidewalks and the streets and the parks and the community center and the university and everything had to be great for an 8-year-old and for an 80-year-old. Then it would be great for everybody from 0 to 100. We got to stop building cities as if everybody was 30-year-old and athletic. So we got to have great cities for all, and we got to have sustainable happiness. This is here we don't have this video because we changed computers, but no worries. So that's what 8 and 80 is. So, but we need to change, but we need to develop a sense of urgency. I love how the president has shown such initiative in so many areas, going from 1% to 30 and now to 50, and internationalizing the university. It's because we need to change. Why urgency? Because we seem to be facing a perfect storm in so many ways. We got traffic congestion everywhere. And we have climate change. We got public health crisis, both physical health, obesity, and also mental health, anxiety and depression. And we got economic crisis, and we feel a little bit overwhelmed. As if it wasn't enough, the population is growing. The population is growing everywhere. Actually, around the world, less than 200 years ago, we only had 1 billion. Today, we got 7, and we're going to stabilize at around 9.5 billion. In the U.S., we're going to increase by 100 to 110 million people in the next 35 years. It's huge. Can you imagine? This is why the university plays such an important role, and each one of you working in the private, in the public, in the NGOs, because we are going to increase by 110 million people in 40 years. I mean, 110 million people, that means we're going to have to build around 40 million homes in the next 40 years. 40 million homes is the same as all the homes in Canada, England, Switzerland, and Denmark together in the next 40 years. So it's really, really important. How are we going to do it? Oklahoma, the population is growing very fast as well. Today is about 4 million people, and it's going to go to 5 million people in the next 35 years. It's very clear that not only do we have to improve the cities that we have today, but we got to create great cities for these million people additional that is coming to Oklahoma. Where are they going to live? How are they going to move? So we have some challenges. Also, we're living longer. This is something very important to understand because it's so new that we don't really get it. The new 65. Let's think for a minute. The people that have ever lived to 65 or over, half of them are alive today. Half. This is something that is totally new, but it's also fantastic because people are also healthier and wealthier and more active and more knowledgeable. And what are they doing? The same thing that they were doing when they were 50 or 40 or 30, a little bit less. So they're not really retiring, it's rehiring. They're doing other activities. Last year in the marathon in London, over 5,000 people who ran were over 60. And when they stopped running the marathon, then they run half marathons. And when people that were playing tennis 5 sets, now they play 3, but they continue doing the same activities. This is the pyramid of the population in 2010. This is in 2050. So you see, all the population is going to grow, but especially the older population, the population over 50. In the US, the population over 65 is going to double in the next 40 years. And some people still say, oh, the great tsunami. It's ridiculous. It's not a tsunami. Why? First, because the tsunami, you never know when it's going to happen. You know, it's out of an earthquake. And second, because the tsunamis are negative. Instead, this can be very, very positive. And of course, we knew, if there is anything easy to predict, it's the population. Whoever's in their 40s today, 10 years from now, is going to be in their 50s. It's not rocket science. So we knew 60 years ago that the baby boomers were coming. In Oklahoma, today, about 1 every 7.5 people is over 65. Now it's going to be 1 in 5. In 35, 40 years. Here's the life expectancy. Think of this, how interesting. Each one of these dots are all the countries in the world. If we had been born just 200 years ago, there was not a single country that had a life expectancy above 45. None. Even in the US, the life expectancy was 39. So many of us would be dead by now. And in only 200 years, we doubled the life expectancy. And now there is not a country in the world with the life expectancy below 45. That's called vaccines, by the way. If you want to talk about vaccines and clean water and sewage, that's what people were dying of 200 years ago. But what are people dying of today? Lifestyle-related issues, heart attacks, respiratory problems, anxiety, depression, the quality of the air. That's why all of us have to work on the built environment. But in many ways, we are like this frog. We are so concerned for the urgent things that we're not looking at the important ones. And the water is getting warmer and warmer, and we are there having fun in the water until we're going to be cooked. So this frog, at least this frog in the middle of a soccer field, is running like crazy because he knows that there's an urgency. So we should be aware of our urgency. Also, people are living in cities. This is also new. 100 years ago, only 2 out of 10 people lived in cities around the world. Today, it's 5 out of 10. In less than 100, it's going to be more than 8 out of 10. In the US, more than 80% of the people live in cities already. And all of the 100 million additional people in the US, more than that, because it's not only the new population, but people moving from rural areas to cities, it's urban. People are going to live in cities. That's why it's so important that we learn about the cities. So when we said that we have doubled the life expectancy in the US, it's very clear that we have learned how to survive. But when we see all of these issues, it's also clear that now we must learn how to live. And that's what this placemaking conference is about, is learning how to live. Because we have an opportunity. How do we turn these challenges into an opportunity? And it's wonderful to be here at this magnificent university, because this opportunity is about the built environment and how we move. So let me now move on to sustainable mobility. Sustainable mobility is very important because in the US, more than 87% of the trips are done by cars. Actually, in Oklahoma, it's even higher. Over 93% of the people go to work in cars. Let me give you a comparison of a city that has similar level of education than Norman, Copenhagen. Only 24%. So instead of 93, 24. So if 24 go work in car, how do the rest of the people go? Well, they bike and walk and take public car. 41 out of 100 trips are done on a bike. 41. Actually, that's where I met Rebecca Sanders, Ian's wife. She was cycling there. She's a hardcore cyclist. In the U.S., less than 2% are done on a bike. And this used to be a video that had lots of people cycling here. So imagine that. And what's important? Why don't they have a lot of traffic jams? Because 41% of the trips are done on a bike. But in sustainable mobility, let's talk about walking, cycling, and public transit. Walking, why am I highlight King? Because walking has to be the most important. There is nothing as important in creating communities and cities as walking. Why? Because everybody walks, and if the pedestrians had plowed, we would be plowing the sidewalks before the roads. But of course, it's about having priority. Places like Copenhagen starts to snow, first they plow the sidewalk, then the bikeways, maybe 2 or 3 times before they even plow the street. And when I'm talking about walking, it's anybody that moves at the speed of someone walking, like someone on a wheelchair. That's how we were created. Just like the birds, they need to fly, or the fish, they need to swim. And the deer, they run. People walk. And that's how we're happy. We are walking, we use all our senses. We see the children playing. We hear the birds singing. We go in front of a coffee shop, we smell the aroma. People walk everywhere, the children in Korea or the youth in Johannesburg. We are pedestrians. That's how we were created. People walk in the summer in Rio or in the winter in Minnesota. And we also ride bikes. And riding bicycles is people of all ages. Riding bicycle is not the 20 to 50 men in spandex. It's everybody. It's also the little kid learning how to balance, or the older adult on a tricycle. And people say, oh, but what if it rains? Well, the Nordic people say there is no such thing as bad weather. It's bad clothing. And then they go on. So this is what's important. So they have public transit. They also have cars, which they use either at night or on weekends or car sharing. And then walking, cycling, and now public transit. Public transit is critical. Public transit is very important. And I'm very happy that here we have people from many municipalities of Oklahoma. Because public transit is not just for the big cities. Any city of 5,000 people, of 10,000, of 100,000, or 10 million, they need public transit. Maybe in the one of 2,000, you need 1 or 2 or 3 buses. In the one of 10 million, maybe you need a train. But you need public transit in any city of any size. Because in any city of any size, the older adults are losing their driver's license and they want to get to places. They want to age in place. In the city of 2,000 people also, the children, if you're under 16, you don't drive. So public transit, where is the gondolas in Medellin? You know, and some people say, oh, but I don't like the bus. You know, it's so funny how people have an issue with the buses. That the other day I was in Malmo in Sweden. What did they do in their buses, their bus rapid transit? They put a nose on the bus and they cover the wheels. And now it looks like a train. But it's cheaper and more flexible than the train. So walking, cycling, and public transit, they gotta be best friends. I'm not saying that this is the end of the car industry. But the way we use cars is changing very, very rapidly. Actually, in the US, and now we're at a university, the young people are smarter than us, the older ones. The young people, the 18 through 24, in the last 2 years, purchased fewer cars than in the last 40. They got even fewer driver's licenses than in the last 40. So it's the new use of cars. The car is no longer a status symbol. For the young people, it's more of a status symbol, the iPad. Or getting on a backpack and going to the wonderful, beautiful campus that you have in Tuscany in Italy. And of course, we got electric cars, and we got hydrogen cars, and we got all kinds of this. But also, we are buying a lot of things through the internet, but we don't get them through the internet. So the companies are hiring, UPS and FedEx are hiring thousands of people on bicycles. Why? Because a truck goes to one central place, and the last 3 miles are done on a bicycle. And also, we are starting to do streets in a different way. It used to be in the old thinking that if we had narrow roads and you couldn't fit cars and public transit, then it was only cars. But that was the old thinking. The new thinking is if you don't fit cars and public transit, then only public transit. And people walking and people cycling. This is about democracy also. It's about having sustainable mobility for everyone. I mean, we've been building cities for thousands of years. It's been only in the last 80 or 100 that we have been building thinking more on car mobility than on people's happiness. So we need to improve walking and cycling and transit in all of our communities. If we're going to improve walking, what do we need to do? We know what we need to do. First, the pedestrians need to be the priority. But they have not been the priority. This is how we have been building cities. This is an insult to people. We're telling this woman, you are a second-class citizen. That's why we need to dignify the pedestrian. And we know how to do it. Look how New York now is doing their crosswalks. And here in Norman, you have so much better weather that you could do crosswalks even nicer. So that's why when Mrs. Borden is talking about beautifying and landscaping, that's why this is so important. Because it's about improving the happiness and the quality of life of everyone. Let's think for a minute that over 5 million people are injured when they are walking in the public spaces. 5 million pedestrians injured every year. 270,000 are killed. Let's imagine for a second. Let's imagine we have 4 planes, one flying over the US, one over Brazil, one over Australia, one over Korea. Today, 4 planes, and they crash, and everybody dies. And tomorrow, another 4 planes. And the next day, it will be a huge crisis. That's how many people walking are killed every day, the equivalent of 4 planes full of people. They're not accidents, they're incidents. What are we doing about it? Clearly not enough. In the US, in the last 10 years, 47,000 pedestrians were killed. That's 16 times more than the people that die in natural disasters. But we don't pay attention to that. Every year, over 76,000 are injured. So if we want to improve walkability, we need to lower the speed. Where people live 20 miles an hour or less. Not because 20 is plenty, sounds nice, but because if you get hit by a car at 20 miles, there is only 5% probability you're going to be killed. If you get hit at 40, it's more than 80%. And there are many studies that show the same. That's why all over the world, people are lowering the speeds. Actually, in New York City, as of November 7, the default speed is 25 miles an hour. So where people live, we need to lower the speed. Actually, in front of the schools, I see all over the world, this one I think is Korea, 30 kilometers an hour, which is the same as 20 miles. And then we say 20 miles when flashing in front of the schools. Why do we lower the speed to 20 miles an hour in front of the schools? Because it works. It works. But let's think for a minute. Do we want our children to be safe only in front of the school? Or everywhere? Why don't we do it everywhere? And have it 20 miles an hour, except the arterials. The arterials can be. So instead of having this, we would say always safe neighborhoods. It's going to be good for health, good for mobility, for business, for everybody. So 20 miles. This is not a thing. All of this that I'm talking is not technical. It's not a technical issue. It's not a financial issue. It's a political issue. That's why everybody has to get involved. If we have a small island in the crosswalks, we eliminate 56% of the accidents. Imagine that someone you love gets killed here because it didn't have a small island. So we know how to do it, but we're still not doing it right. So we got to have those small islands in the middle. The benefits of walking are so amazing that every city, large or small, should have a law that is just 2 words. Considering that everybody's a pedestrian, that every trip begins and ends by walking, that is good for health and environment and mobility and so on, the city of pedestrians first. Pedestrians first. That has to be a law. And then we're going to have children going on a field trip, safe. They cannot walk all in the same light. Light changes, okay, they stop, and then they continue. And if we're going to improve cycling, we need a good attitude like this kid. But let's not waste money on signage or maps or bike parking or whatever. That doesn't improve cycling. Think of anybody here that in Norman or in any city in Oklahoma doesn't bike. It might be you, your spouse, that doesn't bike on the streets because you are afraid. Would you start cycling if there is bicycle parking? Would you start cycling if now there are maps? No. There are only two things that really improve cycling. One is if we lower the speed in the neighborhoods, and two, if we create a grid of protected bikeways. Not one bikeway, a grid where we separate physically the pedestrians from the cyclists and the cyclists from the cars. This used to be Montreal. They had a painted line, only students, mostly men. They created the physical separation, and then everybody. And we have it. This is Paris. This is Vancouver. You go home on a Friday, you come back on a Monday, and it's changed. So we can do the separation in many different ways, but there has to be a physical separation. Otherwise, it's not going to work. I see city after city sometimes we do the hard thing. The hard thing is to get politicians to say, okay, we're going to give you a space for the cyclists. And then they paint a line. That's the hard thing. But we don't do the easy one. That is, enhance that bike lane, but because, if you only have the painted line, it doesn't work. Even with a painted line, where do the cyclists go? On the grass. So we need to add the plastic bollards, some kind of physical separation that will not let the cars go in. And then it's going to feel safe. So we need that. That is so critical if we want to improve. It's something we call the minimum grid. What is the minimum grid? We need to connect places of origin and destination. This just came out last week, a poll across the U.S. The people that want to ride, if there was a physical separation, almost all the ones in greens. No, the ones on red. Who wants physical separation? Everybody, the men and the women in the north, in the south, in the east, blacks, Hispanics, everybody. No difference. And we need the grid. This is Copenhagen. This is Buenos Aires. This is Seville. Seville, Spain has very similar weather than normal. They said, oh, we're not going to bike because we love cars and because we have 110 degrees in the summer. No, they didn't bike is because there was not a grid. As soon as they started creating the grid, they went from 0.6 to 7.5%, and now they're going to 15% of the ride trips. With the 110 degree or with the, we need to create a grid. It's like if we're going to do a power grid. We cannot say, oh, in this neighborhood, yes, in the next neighborhood, no. The power grid, the water grid has to be citywide. Same thing has to be with the bike grid. Walking and cycling is not a frivolity. Walking and cycling is not a joke. Walking and cycling is the only individual mode of mobility for most people. Walking and cycling is the only individual mode of mobility for all children and youth around the world. If you're under 16, you might be the son or daughter of the wealthiest person in the country. The only way of individual mode of mobility is to walk or bike. So safe walking and cycling should be a right. The right to safe and enjoyable mobility. Unless you think that only the people that have the age and the money and the desire to drive a car have a right to individual mobility. And if we take away the word individual, then we say walking, cycling, and transit should be a right. That's why we talk about democracy and human rights and equality and sustainability. And if we're going to improve public transit, we need to make walking, cycling, and transit either better, cheaper, faster, convenient, or else people are not going to switch. One of my brothers told me many years ago, he said, Gil, the development, the civilized city is not the one where the poor have cars. It's the one where the rich use public transit. So we need to create public transit in our communities where the rich can use. And people are transforming the city. Look at Buenos Aires. This was 2011 Buenos Aires. The main avenue, all cars. They needed public transit. What did they do? Very gutsy. Very gutsy. They made BRTs, express BRTs right through the middle. And obviously you don't have this weather, but this is the level of importance. A mayor told me, Gil, now everybody's going to take the bus because we have these big buses. I say, you think anybody's going to get out of the car and take a bus when this is what the bus stop looks like? This is a school, 1,500 students, and this is the bus stop for 1,500 students. So I decided to show that mayor this other bus stop. And he said, Gil, why are you showing me this bus stop? I said, because maybe this is what the bus stop would look like if the decision makers use the bus service. We gotta make it a better option. So why are we talking about walking and cycling and public transit? Because of the benefits. We're going to have cleaner air. Walking, cycling, and transit has fewer gas emissions. And we're going to improve mobility for everyone. And when they say everybody here drives a car, no, we already sold it. A lot of people do not. It's going to also be healthier. Is this what the future looks like? We are having a lot of problems with obesity. I mean, Oklahoma has so many wonderful things. One of the things that doesn't have is the rankings in health. When we take a look, it's way closer to the bottom of the list. And there is no reason why that happens. There is no reason why we could not be the best. There is no reason why we could not have some municipalities say, we're going to be the healthiest, and we're going to turn this around. The cities where walking and cycling is a normal part of everyday life, the obesity rates are very low. Same thing when people take public transit, because people walk to public transit and then they walk from public transit to the places of destination. 1 out of 3 people in the U.S. is obese, and if we don't do something about it, it's going to go up to 44%. And people say, oh, Gil, you don't know, they hear my accent, they say, Gil, it's always been like that. No, it has not always been like that. 20 years ago, no state had more than 20%. Today, no state has less than 20%. It's changed tremendously. Here in Oklahoma, in 1990, only 10%. 2004, 24. Today, it's at almost 33%. So things are getting worse. When we are talking about a sense of urgency, we really got to wake up and we got to work on both the food that we intake as well as the calories that we burn. So we got to work to improve the school meals. We also got to work on improving the availability of good food, of good quality food, and also physical activity. We do 30 minutes a day. It's gonna be good for so many things. That's why the head of the CDC says physical activity is the wonder drug. And it's going to be great for economic development. When we are walking or cycling or taking transit, how much can we carry? For 2 or 3 days, so we buy local. When we are on a car, we buy for 2 or 3 weeks, so we go to the big box stores. And sustainability. All of this improves the personal income. Some people are going to say, I don't care about the environment, I don't care about the health. What's in it for me? Well, what's in it for you is something very important. Many people don't have money to pay the university, or to go on vacation, or to save for retirement. They don't even have money to go to dinner with their family. What are they doing with the money? They're spending it on a car. People are spending 25 to 30% of the income on mobility if they have a car. Imagine at a university, the students, they spend all summers flipping hamburgers up and down to pay a car, instead of backpacking in Australia or doing something more interesting, or going to one of the magnificent international exchanges of the university. 1 out of $4. And of course, the low-income people is even worse. It's not going to be 25%, but maybe 35 or 40% of their income. There is nothing that the politicians could do that have a higher impact on the quality of life of people than to allow the possibility to downsize from 2 cars to 1, or from 1 to 0. And that's going to be great, not only for the personal, but also for the community, because what do you do if, according to the American Automobile Association, the cost of 1 car is $8,500? What do you do if you have $8,500 in your pocket year after year? You improve your garden. You improve your basement. You go to the restaurants. The money stays in the local economy. So instead of buying cars made in China or Mexico, it stays in Oklahoma. So it's very, very important to be able for that. So we dream sometimes, how do we want to live? And we dream of this. Actually, this is very close to the site of the University of Oklahoma in Tuscany. This is how we dream. And then this is what we build. And it's not just LA, many cities all over the place. So we need to, this is an intersection in Atlanta at the same scale as Florence, Italy. So we got to improve parks and public spaces. Why parks and public spaces? For many, are they important? I think children, that's where they learn. Helps muscle strength, coordination, language. That's where we develop a sense of belonging. Also, the children connects them with nature. So they are very important. Last summer, I was watching the U.S. team play. I was in Chicago. Where did I go? I went to a park. The same thing the people were doing in Korea or in Germany when they won. But it's not only public spaces about sports. How about they were doing the demonstrations of the Umbrella Revolution? Where did they go? To the public space. And just a few weeks ago, Jesuit Charlie, to the public, in the public space, we're all equal. Young or old, rich or poor, fat or skinny. So we love the public spaces. And this one in Rio, this wasn't the World Cup. It was 3 months before the World Cup. What was happening? 2 million people. They were going to mass, public mass. That when the Pope went to Rio. 2 million people. Incredible. So, but nevertheless, if we think parks and public spaces are important, it's not so obvious. I go to many municipalities and I show them these sidewalks and these playgrounds, and they tell me, Gil, go do some fundraising. But when I show them a pothole, they go crazy about the pothole. They think maybe a car is going to fall off. or a giraffe is going to come out. And the media plays into this TV station. They hire a woman. All she does is goes and measures potholes. And she has a section on the 6 p.m. news twice a week to tell you about the size of the potholes. And the citizens, they get organized around how to pressure the government. And finally, when they take care of the pothole, the elected officials and engineers and everybody goes to celebrate. Can you imagine if we place as much emphasis on the playgrounds as on the potholes? So when I see this, I say, what is the role of the streets? That even a small pothole has so much attention. Well, when we look at our cities from the air, the biggest public space are the public is the space that belongs to all of us. Public, everybody, young and old, where you drive around. Actually, between 15 and 20% of our city are streets. And of the space that belongs to all of us, between 70 and 90% are streets. So how are we going to use it? Clearly, walking, cycling, and transit takes up a lot less space. That's why things like Oklahoma, the open streets, it's so important because are we going to just move cars 24/7? Let's think about this because what the president was talking about this morning in the opening ceremony of creating places is about, here there used to be a river going through the middle. 40 years ago, what did they do? It was about efficiency, so they built a road. But that was 40 years ago when they said efficiency. Today, people are talking about quality of life. How to retain the best graduates of the university. How to attract the best professors. So people said, the best ones, the best graduates of Oklahoma University want to live here? Probably not. So someone said, wasn't there a river going down? And they brought it out. And would you like to live in this city or in this one? It's the same road. So this is what placemaking is about. Creating places for people. Are we going to build streets for cars or streets for people? Do we want our streets to look like car storage or actually help create community? We do this parking that looks like a vacuum that sucks the life out of the city, or we put street level retail. Change is hard. Not in Norman, not in Tulsa, everywhere. When here the mayor said, should we make this pedestrian? Someone said, my restaurant is going to go broke if the clients don't park in front. But when you go to any public meeting, is what is the general interest. And the general interest must prevail over the particular interest. Always. At the end of the day, the mayor made it pedestrian. You think anyone went broke? 10,000 people buy more food than 93 cars. And he continued. So it's clear the what. So I want to end with the how. I'm just going to mention 5 elements of change. One is urgency, political will, leadership, doers. Urgency. I mean, if we were not convinced with all of these challenges that we are facing an urgency, think about it. 10 years ago, there were 600 million cars in the world. Today, we got a billion. And by 2050, we're going to go to 3 billion. And some people are talking about the driverless cars and all of this. So if we think that these traffic jams were bad with 1 billion, imagine what they're going to look like with 3 billion. The driverless car, this has 2 scenarios. Life with driverless, without, and drive with driverless. Actually, many of the people that are not driving as much because they are getting older, if they don't have to drive, but it's a driverless, they're going to go everywhere. How about the people-less cars? You come here, you don't find parking, so then you tell your car to go around in circles while you come out. Second, we got to have political will. And political will is like Melbourne, Australia. Melbourne used to be a horrible city. Would not have been in the top 300. Even they made fun of themselves, an empty, useless city center. What did they do? Some of the things that Mrs. Boren is doing. They started planting trees, and they started beautifying. They put art that people could walk and touch and look and play. And they planted all of these trees. Look what the street looks without trees and what it looks like with trees. The trees are a clear link that is good for health and environment and business and everything. And they also started improving public transit and making the city more humane and walkable. And today is one of the top 5 cities in any ranking. So it's something that is important. All of these laneways, they turn the laneways into people places. So improving the public spaces, and now everybody's moving. No one wanted to live downtown. Now everybody wants to live downtown. They don't need a car. They save that money. They have wonderful life, day, night, weekends. And when people talk about density, they always say, I don't want that 40-story building. It's not about 40-story buildings. It's about 4 or 5-story buildings next to each other instead of one 40-story far away. We need leadership. And leadership everywhere. And it's not just these world leaders. We need leadership like this friend that is a physical education teacher, that she saw every year fewer kids were walking to school. So what did she do? When they went home on holidays, they came back, and she was dressed up as a pylon. She shut down the parking lot and created drop-off zones half a mile or more away, 4 drop-off zones. And the kids, at minus 24 degrees, they started walking, and they started cycling, because now it was safe, and they were going to be dropped off far away. So we need hundreds. And also, we need doers. We need doers everywhere, like Janet Sarkan and Amanda Burton that did all of this, like the Times Square, and so many transformations. But it was finding solutions to the problems, which is what it was so important that they were there. But it wasn't just these big areas. In addition to the big changes, there were hundreds of little ones like this one, of these street corners. Like the president was talking about this morning, it's just a little trees, a little transformation, a little bit of concrete, and can turn a place that was for cars into a place that is for people. And 5, we need citizen engagement. Citizen engagement is very important. That is the base of placemaking, to honestly listen to the people, not just tokenism, just so that when you go to city council, did you go to the community? Yes, checked. No, we have to go and listen. And if they don't come to us, we have to go to them and find out, because a lot of this is also about uses and activities. We invest millions doing parks and public spaces, and then we don't have to invest the thousands to make it work. To make public places work is more about management, more about uses, more about activities. We went to this place at minus 35. Remember I said how vibrant we could have also the boomers. I said, who's going to come at minus 35? But nevertheless, I went, I took some photos. I went to an elementary school, and then I went to the university. Oh, surprise, at night, public meetings, 70 people. And I asked them for impatience, and I asked them for orchids. What are the impatience? What can we do now? Think of yourself, what can we do in each one of your communities in the next 12 months that is low cost, low risk, and high visibility? A woman said, Gil, when I'm walking home, the sidewalk is very dark. I said, yeah, but if the sidewalk is dark, it's not low cost. She said, no, it's very low cost, because when I'm walking home, the sidewalk is dark, but the street is very well lit. And she said, the street doesn't need so much light because the cars have lights. All I'm asking is for someone to go up on the ladder and the light on the street, turn it 90 degrees. She said it's the same post, the same light. When you ask the citizens come up with great ideas, and then we ask for impatience that are from years 2 to 5. So I want to end by asking you to think outside the box. We need to build broad alliances. We need to involve the private sector and the public and the NGOs. And in the public sector, we need to involve the elected officials at all levels, municipal and county and state and federal. And in the public sector staff, it's not just planning and transportation. We need to involve public health and education and economic development and tourism. And then we need to involve the community, the activists, the media, and the universities. But how do we get all 3 of them to work together? By developing a shared vision and a sense of urgency. So I want to end with an anecdote. Remember I told you about the Simon Bolivar Park? Well, this is how I found it. The Pope came here in 1968 and gave a mass. And this is some of the things, how it looks today. So I'm going to show you how it looks, and then I'll end up by showing you how it looked. This is what we did in 3 years. But it's important because the most important lesson that I learned when we were building this park, not only that it's wonderful and many people use it anytime, is that when it was like this, and then the Pope came in 68 and left, 1 million people came to Mass. For 27 years, nothing happened. Why nothing happened? Because it's easier not to do anything. And when you are doing so many transformations in the university, hats off, it's fantastic, because it's much more difficult to do than not to do. So what are some of the things that happen? When you try to do things, it's what I call civic cadavers. There are some people in the community that you thought they were dead because they haven't done anything for the community. But you try to do something, and they resuscitate. Not to support, to become barriers. But then I also learned something else, that the citizens, they pay us every other week is to get things done, not to find too many excuses why things cannot be done. So each one of us has to become a champion at finding solutions to the problems. and not at finding problems to the solutions. And that's how it was like this for 27 years, and it was like this in just 3 years. So keep in mind, it's not about walking or cycling or public transit. It's not about parks or streets or public spaces. It's about how together we create vibrant cities and healthy communities where people are going to live happier. So we have some challenges, but more than challenges, we have a wonderful opportunity. I wish you all the very best. Thank you.
I think we're going to have to do away with questions because of the time. But stay right here, stay right here. Thank you for your message. We are running late because of our technical difficulties, and I swear I didn't touch the computer when I was up here earlier. So we're going to have to dispense with questions. But I think he left us with inspiration and a call to action, and it's a call to action we've heard. And again, one more round of applause for Gil, and thank him for being with us.
Thank you.